Financial anxiety. A stoic approach to money. Mindset. Here's something that will blow your mind. The ancient Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius never checked his bank account balance obsessively, never lost sleep over market crashes, and never felt that crushing weight in his chest when bills arrived. Yet he managed an entire empire's finances. The difference between him and the millions of people today who break into a cold sweat when their phone buzzes with a bank notification isn't the amount of money they had. It's how they thought about money itself. Most people have their relationship with money completely backwards. They think more money equals less anxiety. But that's not true. Some of the wealthiest people I know are the most financially anxious. Meanwhile, people with modest incomes can sleep peacefully at night. The secret isn't in your bank account, it's in your mind. Today we're going to flip everything you think you know about financial anxiety on its head, using principles that have worked for over 2,000 years. These aren't feel-good platitudes or modern self-help tricks. These are battle-tested strategies that helped people navigate plagues, wars, economic collapses, and personal disasters while maintaining their peace of mind. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely different relationship with money and the anxiety that comes with it. Part 1. The Financial Weather Report. Mindset. What if I told you that the secret to eliminating financial anxiety isn't checking your bank account more often, but treating it exactly like checking the weather? You wouldn't get angry at the sky for raining, would you? Yet millions of people wake up every morning and let their bank balance determine their entire emotional state for the day. Here's what nobody talks about when it comes to money stress. You're fighting a battle you can never win. Every time you try to control things that are completely outside your control, you create more anxiety, not less. The stock market doesn't care about your feelings. Interest rates don't respond to your worry. Economic downturns happen whether you lose sleep over them or not. But here's where it gets interesting. Ancient Stoics figured out something that modern financial advisors still don't understand. They learned to observe their financial situation the same way a meteorologist observes weather patterns. No emotional attachment. No trying to change what can't be changed. Just pure observation and smart preparation. Think about how a meteorologist approaches their job. They don't get upset when they see a storm coming. They don't try to stop the rain. They simply study the patterns, understand what's happening, and help people prepare. That's exactly how you need to approach your finances. The difference between financial peace and financial anxiety comes down to this simple shift. Instead of being a victim of your financial weather, you become the meteorologist of your own money life. You start seeing patterns instead of problems. You prepare instead of panic. You observe instead of obsess. This brings me to tip number 1 out of 10 that will completely transform your relationship with money. It's called the Financial Weather Report Mindset. Starting tomorrow morning, you're going to spend exactly 2 minutes doing something that will change everything. Here's how it works. Every morning, before you check social media, before you look at the news, before you do anything else, you're going to check your financial weather. Look at your bank account, your investments, your bills, whatever financial information you normally check. But here's the key difference. You're going to look at it exactly like a meteorologist looks at a weather map. No judgment, no emotion, no trying to change what you see. You're simply observing and noting patterns. Is this a sunny financial day? Are there storm clouds gathering? Are you in the middle of a financial winter that requires different preparation than a financial summer? After you observe, you ask yourself one simple question. Based on what I'm seeing, what's the smart preparation move today? Not what can I worry about? Not what can I try to control? What can I prepare for? This 2-minute practice will rewire your brain's response to financial information. Instead of triggering anxiety, Checking your finances becomes a calm, strategic activity. You become the observer of your financial weather instead of being tossed around by every financial storm. Part 2. The reverse budgeting philosophy. Most people have budgeting completely backwards, and it's causing them massive anxiety without them even realizing it. They sit down with their income and start dividing it up, trying to predict and control every dollar they'll spend. But what happens when life doesn't follow their perfect little budget? Panic. Stress. The feeling that they're failing at something they should be able to control. Let me share something that will sound crazy at first, but will make perfect sense once you understand it. The ancient Stoics had a practice that modern people would think is insane. They would regularly practice being poor. Not because they wanted to be poor, but because they understood something about human psychology that we've forgotten. When you know you can handle losing something, you stop being afraid of losing it. When you stop being afraid of losing something, you can make clear, rational decisions about it. When you can make clear, rational decisions about money, financial anxiety disappears. Most budgets are built on fear. Fear that you won't have enough. Fear that you'll spend too much. Fear that something unexpected will happen. That fear makes every financial decision feel heavy and stressful. But what if you flipped the entire script? Here's what nobody teaches you about money management. The goal isn't to control every penny. The goal is to know that you'll be perfectly fine, even if you lose a bunch of pennies. That knowledge creates a completely different relationship with your money. Traditional budgeting asks the wrong question. It asks, how should I spend my money? But the question that eliminates anxiety is, how much could I lose and still be okay? When you can answer that question confidently, everything changes. This leads us to tip number 2 out of 10. It's called reverse budgeting, and it's going to flip your entire approach to money management upside down in the best possible way. Instead of budgeting what you plan to spend, you're going to budget what you can afford to lose. This isn't about being negative or expecting the worst. This is about building unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever financial weather comes your way. Here's how it works. Take your current financial situation and ask yourself this question. If I lost half of my income tomorrow, what would I absolutely need to survive? Not what you want, not what you're used to. What do you actually need to maintain a decent life? Write that number down. That's your survival baseline. Everything above that line is extra. Everything above that line is money you can afford to lose without it destroying your life. Suddenly, market fluctuations don't matter as much. Unexpected expenses don't create panic. Job uncertainty doesn't keep you awake at night. But here's where it gets really powerful. Once you know your survival baseline, you start making different choices with everything above that line. You invest more confidently because you know you can afford to lose some of it. You spend more freely on things that matter because you're not operating from scarcity. You sleep better because you know that even in a worst-case scenario, you'll be fine. The ancient Stoics called this poverty training. Once a month, they would live as if they had lost everything. They would eat simple food, wear basic clothes, sleep on the floor. Not as punishment, but as practice. They were training their minds to know that happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances. You don't need to sleep on the floor, but you do need to know your bottom line. When you know exactly what you need to be okay, everything else becomes a bonus instead of a requirement. That shift from requirement to bonus is the difference between financial anxiety and financial peace. Part 3. The Financial Death Meditation. There's a practice that sounds morbid, but is actually the most liberating thing you can do for your financial anxiety. It's something that ancient Stoics did regularly, and it's probably the opposite of what every financial guru has ever told you to do. Instead of visualizing wealth and abundance, they spent time imagining losing everything. Before you think this is some kind of negative thinking exercise, let me explain what's really happening here. Your financial anxiety comes from attachment. You're attached to your bank balance, your salary, your lifestyle, your financial security. The stronger the attachment, the greater the anxiety when that thing feels threatened. But here's the paradox that most people never discover. When you face your worst financial fears directly, when you really imagine what it would be like to lose everything, something amazing happens. You realize you would survive. You realize you would find a way. You realize that your happiness and your worth as a person aren't actually dependent on your net worth. Most people spend their entire lives running from this realization. They accumulate more and more, thinking that if they just get enough money, they'll finally feel secure. But it never works, because the insecurity isn't about the money. It's about the attachment to the money. Every time you check your bank account and feel that little spike of anxiety, what you're really experiencing is attachment fear. You're afraid of losing something that you think you need for your identity or happiness. But what if you didn't need it? What if losing it wouldn't actually destroy you? This brings us to tip number 3 out of 10, and it might be the most powerful one on this entire list. It's called the Financial Death Meditation, and it's going to free you from the prison of financial attachment. Here's how it works, and I want you to try this tonight. At a place where you won't be interrupted for 5 minutes. Close your eyes and imagine that you wake up tomorrow and discover that you've lost everything. Your job is gone. Your savings are gone. Your investments have disappeared. You have nothing but the clothes on your back. Now, instead of panicking, walk yourself through what would actually happen. Where would you sleep? What would you eat? How would you survive? As you think through each challenge, you'll start to realize something powerful. You would figure it out. You would find help. You would discover resources you didn't know existed. You would adapt. But here's the most important part. As you imagine losing everything external, pay attention to what remains. Your ability to think doesn't disappear. Your relationships don't vanish. Your skills and experience stay with you. Your capacity to learn and grow remains intact. The core of who you are survives completely. This isn't about being pessimistic or inviting disaster. This is about discovering that your deepest fears aren't as scary as you think they are. When you know that you could handle losing everything, you stop being controlled by the fear of losing anything. Do this meditation once a week for 5 minutes. Each time, imagine losing something different. 1 week, imagine losing your job. Another week, imagine a market crash wiping out your investments. Another week, imagine an emergency that drains your savings. Each time you do this exercise, you'll feel a little bit lighter. The grip that financial outcomes have on your emotions will start to loosen. You'll make better financial decisions because you're not making them from fear. Most importantly, you'll discover that your peace of mind was never actually dependent on your financial circumstances. Part 4. The Dichotomy of Control Money Map. Here's the brutal truth about financial anxiety that nobody wants to admit. Most of your money stress comes from trying to control things that are completely outside your control while ignoring the things you actually can control. You lose sleep worrying about the stock market, but you haven't increased your savings rate in years. You stress about inflation, but you haven't developed a new skill that could increase your income. You panic about economic uncertainty, but you haven't built an emergency fund. This backwards approach to financial control is why so many people feel helpless with money. They're pouring their mental energy into things that won't respond to that energy, while neglecting the areas where their effort could actually make a difference. The ancient Stoics had a fundamental principle that solved this problem completely. They divided everything in life into two categories: things they could control and things they couldn't control. Then they had a simple rule: put all your energy into the first category. Accept everything in the second category. This sounds simple, but when it comes to money, most people have never actually made this distinction clearly. They have a vague sense that some financial factors are outside their control, but they've never sat down and created a clear map of what's what. Without this map, your mind defaults to worrying about everything equally. The threat of recession feels just as urgent as the need to increase your emergency fund. Concerns about inflation feel just as actionable as improving your spending habits, but they're not the same at all. When you clearly separate controllable financial factors from uncontrollable ones, something magical happens. Your anxiety immediately decreases because you stop wasting mental energy on things that won't respond to your worry. Your effectiveness immediately increases because you focus your limited time and attention on areas where you can actually make progress. Finally, add your dreams. What would you need to do the things that are genuinely important to you? Travel you actually want to do. Hobbies you care about. Experiences that matter to you. This is your enough line. Here's the key part. Your enough line should be based on what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what your neighbors have, not what social media tells you to want. What do you personally need to feel genuinely satisfied with your financial life? Once you have this number, something amazing happens. Every dollar above your enough line becomes freedom money. You can invest it aggressively because losing it won't hurt your actual life. Finally, add your dreams. What would you need to do the things that are genuinely important to you? Travel you actually want to do. Hobbies you care about. Experiences that matter to you. This is your enough line. Here's the key part. Your enough line should be based on what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what your neighbors have, not what social media tells you to want. What do you personally need to feel genuinely satisfied with your financial life? Once you have this number, something amazing happens. Every dollar above your enough line becomes freedom money. You can invest it aggressively because losing it won't hurt your actual life. You can spend it generously because it's not money you need. You can give it away because it's beyond what brings you satisfaction. But here's the most important part. Once you reach your enough line, you get to choose whether to keep accumulating or not. Some people will choose to keep building wealth because they enjoy the process. Others will choose to focus their energy on non-financial goals because they've achieved financial sufficiency. Both choices are fine, but now they're choices instead of compulsions. You're accumulating money because you want to, not because you're afraid of not having enough. That shift from fear-driven accumulation to choice-driven accumulation is the difference between financial anxiety and financial freedom. Your enough line isn't permanent. You can adjust it as your life changes. But having any clear definition of enough is infinitely better than having no definition at all. When you know what enough looks like, you'll know when you have it. And when you know you have enough, financial anxiety becomes impossible. Part 6. The Financial Stoics Emergency Plan. The reason most people panic during financial emergencies isn't because they don't have money. It's because they don't have a plan. When crisis hits, their brain goes into fight or flight mode, and fight or flight mode makes terrible financial decisions. You end up making choices based on fear instead of logic, emotion instead of strategy, panic instead of preparation. But here's what separates people who handle financial emergencies well from people who don't. The people who handle them well made their decisions before the emergency happened. They pre-decided their response to various financial disasters while their mind was calm and clear. Think about airplane safety instructions. They don't wait until the plane is crashing to explain what to do. They tell you the plan while you're sitting calmly in your seat before anything goes wrong. That's exactly what you need to do with your financial life. Most people have some kind of emergency fund, but they don't have an emergency plan. They have money set aside for disasters, but they haven't thought through how they would actually use that money during different types of disasters. So when something goes wrong, they have to make complex decisions while they're stressed, scared, and not thinking clearly. The ancient Stoics had a practice called prio malorum, which means rehearsing misfortune. They would spend time imagining various challenges and difficulties, not to invite them, but to prepare for them mentally. They understood that the time to develop your response to a crisis is before the crisis happens. This brings us to tip number 6 out of 10. It's called the Financial Stoics Emergency Plan, and it's going to eliminate the panic that comes with unexpected financial challenges. Here's how to build your emergency plan. Start by identifying the most likely financial emergencies you could face. Job loss, medical expenses, car repairs, home repairs, family emergencies that require travel or financial support. For each potential emergency, you're going to pre-decide your exact response. Let's start with job loss, since that's the most common financial emergency. Right now, while you're not stressed about losing your job, decide what you would do if you lost your job tomorrow. What expenses would you cut immediately? What expenses could you delay? What alternative income sources could you activate quickly? How long would your emergency fund last with these adjustments? Write out your job loss plan step by step. Month 1, you do this. Month 2, you do that. Month 3, you implement these additional changes. Having this plan doesn't mean you're expecting to lose your job. It means you're prepared if it happens. Do the same thing for medical emergencies. What's your plan if you face unexpected medical expenses? Do you know what your insurance actually covers? Do you know what payment plans are available? Do you know which expenses you would prioritize if you couldn't pay everything at once? Create plans for home emergencies, car emergencies, family emergencies, and any other financial challenges that are realistic possibilities in your life. Each plan should be specific and actionable. Not, I'll figure it out, but I'll do these specific things in this specific order. Here's the powerful part. Once you have these plans, you stop worrying about these emergencies. Your brain knows that if they happen, you're prepared. You've already made the hard decisions while you were thinking clearly. All you have to do is implement the plan. But there's an even more powerful benefit. Having these plans makes you more confident in your day-to-day financial decisions. You take more calculated risks because you know how you'd handle the downside. You invest more aggressively because you know how you'd handle losses. You spend more freely on things that matter because you know how you'd handle unexpected expenses. Your emergency plan becomes the foundation of financial confidence. When you know you're prepared for the worst realistic scenarios, everything else feels manageable. Financial anxiety requires uncertainty. When you remove uncertainty through preparation, you remove the foundation that anxiety needs to exist. Part 7. The money as tool, not master. Reframe. Here's a question that will reveal everything about your relationship with money. When you think about money, do you think about what you can do with it? Or do you think about what it can do to you? Do you see money as something you use to create the life you want? Or as something that controls how you feel about your life? Most people have this backwards without realizing it. They've made money the master of their emotions, their decisions, their sense of self-worth, and their daily peace of mind. When the stock market goes up, they feel good about themselves. When their bank account goes down, they question their life choices. When they make money, they feel successful. When they lose money, they feel like failures. But money is not a scorecard for your life. Money is not a measure of your worth as a person. Money is not the source of happiness or security or meaning. Money is a tool, nothing more, nothing less. The ancient Stoics had a term for things like money. They called them preferred indifference. This means they would prefer to have money rather than not have money. But they were indifferent to whether they actually had it or not, because their happiness didn't depend on it. This sounds impossible to most modern people, because we've been trained to think that money is essential for happiness. But here's what the Stoics understood that we've forgotten. External things can contribute to your life, but they cannot create your life. They can make certain experiences easier, but they cannot make you a better person. They can provide convenience, but they cannot provide meaning. When money is your master, every financial outcome feels like a judgment on your life. When money is your tool, financial outcomes are just information about what tools are available for what you want to build. This brings us to tip number 7 out of 10. It's called the money as tool, not master reframe. And it's going to change how you think about every dollar you earn, spend, save, or lose. Here's how to make this shift. Every time you interact with money, ask yourself this question. Am I using money, or is money using me? Am I making this financial decision to create something I want, or am I making it because I'm afraid of how I'll feel if I don't? When you spend money, are you buying something that will genuinely improve your life? Or are you spending money to change how you feel about yourself? When you save money, are you building resources for future goals? Or are you hoarding money because having more makes you feel more secure as a person? When you invest money, are you using that money to build wealth that will give you more options? Or are you investing because you think your net worth determines your worth as a person? These distinctions matter because they reveal whether you're in control of your money or your money is in control of you. Here's a daily practice that will reinforce this reframe. Every morning, remind yourself of this truth. Money is a tool I use to build the life I want. Money is not the source of my happiness, security, or self-worth. Money cannot make me a better person, but I can use money to express the person I already am. When you check your bank account, remind yourself that you're looking at information about your available tools, not a grade on your life performance. When you make financial decisions, remind yourself that you're choosing how to use your tools, not determining your value as a person. This reframe has practical implications for every financial choice you make. You'll spend money more intentionally because you'll ask whether this purchase serves your actual goals rather than your emotional needs. You'll save money more effectively because you'll be building resources rather than building your identity. You'll invest money more wisely because you'll focus on realistic returns rather than trying to prove something to yourself or others. Most importantly, you'll stop deriving your sense of security from your financial situation and start deriving it from your ability to handle whatever financial situation arises. When money is your tool instead of your master, you become unshakable regardless of what happens to your money. Part 8. The Present Moment Spending Technique. Most of your worst financial decisions happen when you're not actually present for them. You buy things when you're stressed, bored, excited, sad, or distracted. You make financial choices to change how you feel rather than to get what you actually need. You spend money to solve emotional problems that money can't solve. Here's what happens in your brain during emotional spending. Something triggers an uncomfortable feeling. Your mind immediately starts looking for ways to change that feeling. Spending money becomes a quick fix because it gives you a temporary sense of control, excitement, or comfort. But the underlying feeling doesn't actually go away. It just gets covered up temporarily. So you end up with buyer's remorse, financial stress, and the same emotional issue you were trying to solve in the first place. Plus, now you have less money to handle whatever real problems might come up. The ancient Stoics understood that most human suffering comes from not being present for our own experiences. We make decisions based on how we want to feel, rather than what the current situation actually requires. We react to our thoughts about reality rather than responding to reality itself. This pattern shows up everywhere in financial life. You buy coffee because you're tired instead of getting enough sleep. You order takeout because you're stressed instead of dealing with what's stressing you. You shop online because you're bored instead of finding meaningful activities. You upgrade your phone because everyone else has a newer one, instead of asking whether your current phone actually needs upgrading. None of these are necessarily bad financial decisions, but they become bad decisions when you're making them unconsciously, trying to fix feelings that spending money can't actually fix. This brings us to tip number 8 out of 10. It's called the present moment spending technique, and it's going to eliminate impulse purchases and emotional spending from your life. Here's how it works. Before you spend money on anything beyond basic necessities, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what am I feeling right now? Second, am I trying to use this purchase to change how I feel? Third, if I weren't feeling this way, would I still want to make this purchase? If you're trying to use the purchase to change your feelings, that's a red flag. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make the purchase, but it means you should wait. Give yourself 24 hours. If you still want the item after 24 hours, and you want it for practical reasons rather than emotional ones, then consider buying it. But here's the most important part of this technique. During that 24-hour waiting period, deal with the feeling that triggered the desire to spend. If you wanted to buy something because you were stressed, address the stress. If you wanted to buy something because you were bored, find a meaningful activity. If you wanted to buy something because you felt inadequate, work on the self-worth issue. Most of the time, when you address the underlying feeling, the desire to make the purchase disappears. You realize you didn't actually want the thing. You wanted to feel different, and buying the thing seemed like a shortcut to feeling different. This technique works for big financial decisions too. Before you take on debt, change investments, or make major purchases, check in with your emotional state. Are you making this decision because it's the right financial move, or because you're trying to feel more secure, successful, or in control? Financial decisions made from clear, present-moment awareness are almost always better than financial decisions made from emotional reactivity. When you're present for your spending decisions, you spend money on things that actually improve your life, rather than things that temporarily change your mood. The goal isn't to never spend money on things you enjoy. The goal is to spend money consciously, from a place of clarity, rather than emotional impulse. When you master present-moment spending, you'll find that you enjoy your purchases more, regret them less, and have more money available for the things that truly matter to you. 9. The financial virtue focus. Here's something that will completely shift how you think about money success. Instead of measuring your financial progress by how much money you have, what if you measured it by what kind of person your financial choices are helping you become? Instead of asking whether you're getting richer, what if you asked whether you're getting wiser, more courageous, more disciplined, or more generous? Most people judge their financial life by external outcomes. Did the investment go up? Did I save enough this month? Am I making more money than last year? But external outcomes are partly outside your control. Market performance, economic conditions, and unexpected expenses can make your net worth fluctuate regardless of how smart your decisions are. When you judge your financial success only by external outcomes, you're setting yourself up for anxiety because you're measuring yourself by things you can't completely control. But there's another way to measure financial success completely within your control and eliminates anxiety entirely. The ancient Stoics' measure of success was character development.